Hello everyone, Tyler here with the final installment of our three-part episode on electromagnetic saturation events. In this video, we're going to discuss some of the real-world effects that these events can have on our lives here at ground level. But first, I want to discuss the concept of alarmism in prepping. In this context, alarmism is the idea that many preppers focus on topics that are particularly alarming to the exclusion of a lot more likely situations which are less compelling to focus on right now. This kind of focus can be extremely detrimental for many reasons, not the least of which is that it can cause newcomers to the practice to become overwhelmed or skeptical because of this constant focus on extreme scenarios. I think it's necessary for preppers to accurately assess the threats that they may face, and so I'm going to focus on this in future episodes, but for now, I want to share just a couple of thoughts. I think that everybody should have at least some emergency preparations for the most likely scenarios that they will face. And to facilitate this, I think that we should all assess threats on the basis of likelihood, magnitude, and the difficulty to prepare for those situations. The situations that we're going to discuss today provide a good example of this because they exist across the spectrum in all of the metrics that I just mentioned. So let's jump into it. As preppers, we want to be aware of the likelihood of various challenges that we might face. And in the case of electromagnetic saturation events, it is safe to say that some place on Earth is experiencing electromagnetic interference from the sun at any given time. While this activity is usually limited to the polar regions of the Earth and usually limited to minor interference, situations like the ones that we've discussed in previous episodes can cause the scope and magnitude of these events to stretch across the face of the Earth and to have some truly devastating effects. Before we get into listing individual effects, I want to remind everybody that I'm not an expert on any of these subjects, and that because of the lack of public up-to-date information on these topics, it's very difficult to paint an accurate picture of the effects that we might expect to see. Because of this, preppers are often forced to use an informed imagination to put ourselves in situations that are foreign to our experience. Please keep in mind that much of this is just best guesswork, and that the future will always bring changes that will undermine our current understanding of many things. So let's take a minute to imagine some of the effects that we might experience at a personal and societal level during some of these catastrophes. Keep in mind the unpredictable nature of these events and the fact that these imaginings are best used to help us adapt mentally to future life-changing challenges. Beginning simply, we can expect to see electromagnetic interference with digital systems like radio and telecommunications networks, up to and including the complete destruction of these digital systems and the loss of nearly all digital information. Power grid surges caused by electromagnetic induction may cause power surges in home appliances, electrical explosions at power grid transformers and some industrial and home appliances, and long-term or permanent destruction to the power grid infrastructure, including to some components that take years for production and delivery. Failures in medical and transportation technology will be associated with immediate deadly hazards. These will be associated with life support technology, pacemakers, and of course, motor vehicles. The operation of modern motor vehicles relies on computer systems which will likely be crippled in most of these situations, resulting in catastrophic failures, especially at high speeds. Contrary to popular depictions, most forms of air travel are somewhat insulated against these types of electromagnetic interference, and aside from this, many types of air flight are capable of performing relatively safe, unpowered landings. Much of the threat from these events comes from the secondary situations which they create. Because of the interconnected nature of our modern world, a crippling blow to our electrical digital network will likely cause a cascade of failures throughout other industrial and economic sectors, causing what is called a full systemic collapse. This kind of full societal collapse is one of the most discussed topics among preppers, and so it's the kind of thing that I'd like to share my opinion on in future episodes. For now, I'd like to summarize our concerns related to electromagnetic saturation events by simply pointing out our constant reliance on technologies that will be crippled in these kinds of catastrophes. From motor vehicles to elevators to using the power grid to prepare our food on a daily basis, Most of us would find ourselves completely at a loss for what to do if we ever found ourselves without the use of these technologies. So now that we've taken a look at a lot of the effects that might occur during some of these events, what can we do to prepare against the challenges that we might personally face in these scenarios? One of the most popular preparations in the case of an EMP event is the Faraday Cage, named after one of the pioneers in the field of electromagnetism, Michael Faraday. A properly designed Faraday cage will protect sensitive electronics that are stored inside during most electromagnetic saturation events. Because most of these events threaten access to digital information like the internet, many preppers who build Faraday cages take it upon themselves to store vital information like survival and medical texts in digital form inside the safe area of their Faraday cages for future access. Because these events have a great likelihood of triggering a full systemic collapse, it's important to consider this when making any preparations, and that's why we're going to focus on it in future episodes. Aside from tangible preparations that we can make, I think it's important for everybody to gain the skills necessary to operate on a basic level without the technologies that we've come to rely upon so much. But I believe that there's something more important than tangible preparations or even primitive skills, and this is an adaptive mindset and mindfulness. I believe that if we keep an adaptive mindset and that if we stay mindful of our reliance on technology and modern conveniences for our own safety, we will give ourselves the best chance of surviving life-changing challenges that may come in the future. This has been just a brief look at some of the threats posed by electromagnetic saturation events. Thank you for joining us, and I hope that you'll stay tuned with Let's Talk About Prepping for future episodes. Be safe out there, everybody.